Hello and welcome to Hot and Heavy, the Elaine podcast. I'm your host, Shivani Desai. Today I'll be talking about Season 7, Episode 19, The Calzone. Hello everyone. I hope everyone's doing well out there. I'm doing pretty well. It's kind of a busy week, but it's good busy stuff. I have a callback tonight for a pretty exciting play, and I'm so excited to be asked to audition for a certain role in this play, which is called POTUS, and I believe it's on Broadway still. It's about the women behind the scenes of a bumbling president. So kind of the women who keep everything together for this idiot president that's in office. And I have been asked to audition for the role of the press secretary, and I'm really excited. Okay. Well, I'm trying to say this without sounding like really self-deprecating or not at all confident. I know I could do this role, but I also haven't done professional theater ever. I haven't done theater since high school. I mean, I've done improv and sketch comedy theater, but nothing like this, like a professional, well-known play. But I'm really excited to get on my feet tonight and attend the callback. But yeah, so that's just a little bit on my mind. I do want to rehearse it quite a bit today, so I'm going to not rush through this episode, but I certainly I'm going to be cutting out the fat of what I want to talk about, or what maybe some of the tangents I go on for sure. But I do want to mention a couple Seinfeld IRL moments that happened in this last week. I encountered a close talker that was last week at the gym. This man who was set up next to me in my strength training class, the instructor did the thing that I find annoying, but she's like, say hi to your neighbor. You guys are going to be in this together during class. And I'm like, okay. So I look over at the guy. He's an older gentleman. I'm putting him in mid to late 60s. And I say hello, and he just kind of closes in on me super close. He's like, I'm Andy. And I'm like, oh, hello, I'm Shivani. And, well, I don't know if it's just an older man thing, but he's like, Shivani, what's that all about? Like, it's my fucking name. Anyway, whatever. He seemed nice enough, but just a real close talker. He didn't stink or anything, which was that's always my fear when someone comes in really close, or when I see it on TV, people's like faces together. I'm always like, God, I hope their breath is okay. It would really suck if they had just gross breath, but no, he was perfectly pleasant smelling. But I tried to make some conversation after he, interrogated me about what my name was all about. He was wearing a shirt that said, I'd rather be rowing. And so I brought up how rowing is having quite the moment right now between lessons in chemistry. I don't know if any of you've read that book or watched the series, but rowing is a big part of it. And the George Clooney directed movie Boys in the Boat, which is also a book. And he really lit up when I mentioned rowing, but that was probably the extent of it. And the entire time, very, very close to my face. So I thought, oh, a Seinfeld moment. And then my second Seinfeld in real life moment was, it was my fault, but I had to give an I'm sorry wave when I was driving over the weekend. It was to my son's playoff game, basketball game, which they lost in a real bad heartbreaker. Oh, it was really tough. A lot of tears. But anyway, I was driving to this middle school where the playoffs were, and it was very confusing. And I ended up going the wrong way. So I had to do like a 3-point turn to like turn around, and a bunch of cars were sort of waiting for me to figure what the hell I was doing out. And I had to give multiple I'm sorry waves. And luckily, everyone was very pleasant about it. They gave me a "it's okay" wave. I could tell like that was what they were saying with their heads and the tilt of their head, So it was very cordial all around, which I was thankful for. Okay, let's get into this episode. The synopsis for the calzone is as follows. An eggplant calzone helps George gain leverage with his boss. The bond is threatened when a misunderstanding over a tip jar incident gets George banned from the calzone shop. Elaine's acquaintance, Todd, is using dating loopholes to become her boyfriend. Jerry dates a woman who can get anything she wants, while Kramer's fetish for wearing only warm clothes leads to his burning them in a pizza oven. This episode, oh shit, I don't have it. I forgot to write down the writer. I think it's Alec Berg. Hang on, guys. Just hang tight while I look this up. Apologies, I really dropped the ball. Writers. Alec Berg. Okay, yeah, it's Alec Berg who's the writer. Okay, we start out in Yankee Stadium. George is in a meeting and he's talking to the group about extending the stall doors in the bathrooms all the way down to the floor. Now, this is a callback to when he mentioned this to Susan and she wanted to change the subject. Well, Steinbrenner cuts him off. He tells him it's a crazy idea. People would suffocate in there. But then he gets distracted by what George is eating. George is like, oh, it's a calzone. Well, Big Stein wants a taste. He takes a bite and he loves it. Well, he gets too distracted by the calzone to continue the meeting, and he tells George to get him an eggplant calzone. All right, next we're in Jerry's apartment. Elaine is there, and Jerry asks, who are you having dinner with? She's like, oh, one of these fabric wholesalers, Todd Gack. She tells him that she won a bet from him. He bet her that Dustin Hoffman was in Star Wars. A short Jewish guy fighting Darth Vader? I don't think so, Jerry says. And he's like, oh, so the loser had to buy dinner. Yeah. Jerry walks away a bit suspicious. What? Elaine asks. Oh, nothing. Kramer enters. He's doing this little dance. His clothes are straight out of the dryer and they're all warm. He asks Elaine to feel his pants. And she says, I'll see you later, and exits. And Kramer tells Jerry this is his new thing. He's not putting on clothes until they're right out of the dryer. Oh, so every time you want to get dressed, you have to go to the basement and use the dryer? Kramer wants to know what he's doing later, and he says, oh, I have a date with Nikki. Oh, she's a beauty. She's also quite bold. Oh, bold and beautiful. My take on this scene, great laugh acting here by JLD when she's telling Jerry about the bet that she won. Dustin Hoffman in Star Wars is great. It's funny, but it's not that funny. Like it's not something you'd laugh that hard at as an audience member, but JLD's laugh performance makes us laugh. Like, I know that's why I'm more amused by it. Again, not easy to do, but JLD does it well every time. I also like her denial of Kramer's offer to feel his pants. It's really funny as well. I'll see you later. All right, next we're back at Yankee Stadium, and George is at Steinbrenner's desk, and they're eating calzones together. Stein is going on about how it's so well designed, the pita pocket prevents it from dripping. Then he gets a call about a lost and found. Well, Steinbrenner doesn't like it, but George says, it might be a good idea. Well, that changes Steinbrenner's mind. But he says there should be a time limit. We're not running a pawn shop here. All right, next we're at the movie theater. Jerry and Nikki are there, and they see Elaine and Todd Gack in line. Everyone gets introduced, and Jerry ribs Todd Gack a little bit. Who do you think was in Star Wars? Sammy Davis Jr.? Nikki tells them they're going to see Means to an End. Elaine says, oh, well, we were going to see that too, but it's sold out. So instead we're seeing Blame It on the Rain. Jerry says to Nikki, want to see what you can do? She turns and walks away to the ticket booth. Elaine asks, what's she going to do? There aren't any more tickets. We'll see, Jerry says. Todd asks Jerry about cigars and says that he's going to Montreal and he can get Cubans for dirt cheap. Oh, that'd be a good idea for George's wedding, Jerry says. And Todd says, oh, well, I'll get you a case and I can get them to you through Elaine. Well, Nikki arrives back with 2 tickets to Means to an End. How'd you do that? Elaine asked. I just talked to the manager. All right, Jerry says, enjoy Blame It on the Rain. The actress in this scene is Dylan Tays, who plays Nikki. There aren't too many credits to her name, but she did also appear in Beverly Hills 90210, CSI New York, and The Naked Truth. I have to say, this is a very blatant case of being cast because of beauty over acting skills. Dylan Tays is gorgeous. There's no doubt about it, but yikes, not the strongest actress. Her voice kind of irks me. She's just got a very flat performance. Sorry, Dylan, just not my fave. My take on this scene, I like these four running into each other at the movies. It's a fun interaction. And just shout out to the guy who plays Todd Gack. His name is John Diaquino. He's very funny because he plays this character so straightforward and earnest, which just makes it hilarious. He doesn't do anything over the top that's funny necessarily, but he just plays it so like grounded. And sorry, but Nikki is such a jerk for not getting tickets for Elaine and Todd. She knew they wanted to see Means to an End. Hello. All right, next we're at Monk's. George is very proud to tell Jerry about the lost and found he's responsible for at Yankee Stadium. And it's all because of the calzone. George is like, I'm like a drug dealer for him. I'm having lunch with him every day. He doesn't make a move without me. And then George tells him about a situation with the tip jar at the calzone place. So we see kind of a flashback of him dropping money into a tip jar, but the guy looks away. And then he thinks George stiffed him. So he gets no credit for it. You know, what's the point if they don't see it? And Jerry says, so I guess you don't make it a habit of giving to the blind. Not bills. That is one of the funniest interactions, I have to say, in the series. It always makes me laugh. And then Jerry tells George about how Nikki got tickets to the sold-out movie. Beautiful women, George says. They can get away with murder. There's no stopping them. She's like a beautiful Godzilla. And George says he's like thousands of fleeing Japanese. Another great line. Really funny stuff. All right, next we're in Jerry's apartment. Jerry enters and Kramer has a pile of coins on his table. He's sorting through them to find quarters for the dryer. Jerry is so annoyed. Why can't you do this on your table? Because I don't have a table, he says. Elaine enters and Jerry asks, oh, how was Blame It on the Rain? She's like, hey, thanks for getting us tickets too. Oh. Jerry asks her if the movie was part of the bet. She says no, they were both just in the mood for one. Jerry's like, you know, Elaine, it's not my way to intrude on the lives of close friends. Oh, is that so? He says yes, but he does feel it's his duty to tell her that Todd Gack pretty much made a bet he knew he was going to lose just to get her to go to dinner with him. She's like, well, that doesn't make sense. Why didn't he just ask me out? Because if he doesn't ask you out, he can't get rejected. He's found a dating loophole. And Elaine doesn't buy it. He asks what happened after the movie. She says, nothing. He just walked me home. To the door? Yes. That's a date. No, it's not. Jerry's like, well, I never walk you home. And she says, well, that's because you're a jackass. Kramer finally finds a quarter and asks if anyone needs their clothes dried. No. They both just are like, get out of here. And Kramer exits. Jerry asks how she left it with him. And she's like, oh, I'm supposed to meet him later to get your cigars. That's another loophole. 2 dates without asking you out. She says, you're crazy. Crazy like a man. All right, my take on this scene. Well, just like in the last episode, it has to be explained to Elaine by Jerry that a guy is working her. Last time it was Craig the salesman from the Andover shop, and now with Todd Gack. And if you listen to this podcast, you know how much that bugs me. The Elaine Bennis I know would totally be onto a guy without Jerry having to tell her. I do love the plot of the dating loophole, though. I think it is very clever, but maybe Elaine should be the loophole executor. What a fun twist that would be. I would love if Elaine was the one doing the loophole executing versus it being done to her and Jerry having to explain it to her. And I feel like one thing missing from this conversation is whether or not anything felt romantic about their night out, or if Elaine is even interested in him. The sort of yes, he is, no, he's not back and forth in this scene just isn't fun without some deeper context, which Seinfeld used to do in earlier seasons. They used to sort of deconstruct these types of social situations, but it's becoming more rare in these later seasons. There are just a lot of like quicker scenes and they move on to the next thing pretty quickly. And I don't know. There's part of me that definitely thinks Seinfeld improved as time went on, but I do miss some of those longer scenes where they really, like I said, deconstruct stuff and in such a clever way, that Larry David, Jerry Seinfeld way. So I feel like this could have been something they could have done that with, but no, we're in the era of very quick and plentiful scenes. And just to give you an example, when I was covering the first 2 or 3 seasons, it was 10 scenes tops, like 10 scenes that were just a little bit longer, a little bit more in depth. And now there's at least 20 scenes per episode. So that just goes to show you the writing is just very, the scenes are cut down. The writing isn't as deep, but hey, you know what? It's still really funny. I'm not complaining. And then finally, I also love her calling Jerry a jackass. Anytime she gives it back to Jerry is a good thing. All right, next we are at Paisano's, the calzone shop. George is getting the calzones and he's telling the guy how his last name is Italian. We're kind of like countrymen, Paisano's. So then he goes to drop $1 into the tip jar when the guy gets called from the back. So he doesn't see it. George does drop it in. Well, George tries to get the bill out, but the guy turns around, freaks out. You're stealing my money? And he's like, no, I wasn't trying to take it out. But the guy kicks him out and tells him to never come back. All right, next we're at Yankee Stadium. George arrives at Steinbrenner's office and he's starving. He's so excited he's there with the calzones. George tries to steer him away because now he's banned from Paisano's, so he suggests other options for lunch. Corned beef or Chinese? Nope, Steinbrenner's not interested. He says when he finds something he likes, he sticks with it. All right, next we're on Elaine's stoop. She's thanking Todd Gack for dinner, so it looks like they went to dinner when he gave her the cigars, and he's like, oh, well, I had to give you the cigars, and we were both hungry, so then Elaine decides to directly ask him if these were dates, and he's sort of taken aback and offended, but she's like, come on, Dustin Hoffman in Star Wars? And he says, Elaine, that was a legitimate bet, and I lost. Oh, okay, she says. Well, good night. He asks if she's not doing anything on Saturday. You want to meet somewhere? Now, what is that? Is that a date? He says, why can't 2 people do something without it being a date? All right, she says, I'm sorry. It's not a date. No way. So I'll see you Saturday. All right, Elaine says. He says with a big smile, pick you up at 8. All right, my take on this scene. Okay, this I like. Elaine confronting Todd Gack. Again, the performance here by John D'Aquino makes me laugh. He's not going to get called out on this loophole. Not at all. He's denying and denying. And speaking of that, I love how sternly the denial is. Like, he's very like, no way, this is not a date. And then the enthusiastic invitation for Saturday night is just such a great juxtaposition of like how offended he is. And then he's like, hey, how about Saturday night? And the back and forth of that ending with pick you up at 8 with that big smile. Just, again, it's just super funny. JLD doesn't get a lot of the comedy per se, but I do like all of her reactions. She's just like, come on, And I feel like she's creating like a safe space for him to admit it. She's not like angry or just accusatory. She's just kind of like, hey, can you just tell me, So I do like that tone as well. All right, next we're on the road. Jerry and Nikki are in a car and Jerry has just been pulled over and he's not stressed at all. He's just tapping away happily on his steering wheel. The officer asks him if he knows the posted speed limit and he says, gotta be 55. Do you know how fast you were going? A lot faster than that. He asks him to step out of the car and Jerry obliges. He needs the license and registration. Absolutely. Then he asks Nikki to bring the officer the license and registration, and she says, no problem. The officer informs him that he had him on the radar at 93 miles an hour. You must have gotten me when I slowed down to take that curve, because I was going well over 100. Nikki approaches and says, do you really have to give us a ticket? The officer is mesmerized by her beauty and just freezes. And Jerry says, all right, let's hit it. Okay, look. I don't want to get too dark here, but can we say white privilege? Holy shit. Like, what the fuck? Like, they could never do this scene with any person of color ever. I mean, I know this is a comedy and it's light, but I can't help but think of that stuff now. And it also reminds me of a really great episode of Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. So Jerry, the guest for that episode, is Chris Rock. And Jerry, he picks out a car for every episode that reminds him of whoever he is interviewing. So he had like a classic Porsche. I believe it's like a Porsche 911 or whatever. So during the episode, it's at the end, he's like, you want to see what this thing can do? And Chris Rock's like, all right. So they're on this highway and Jerry is just speeding down the highway. And Chris Rock is like, hang on, there's a cop there. And he like turns his head. He's like, yep. And he's got his lights on. He's coming after us. So they cut to like Jerry being stopped at the side of the road. And Chris Rock tells him, he goes, I'd be shitting my pants right now if I wasn't with you. So I just thought that was a great illustration of what whites can get away with when it comes to law enforcement, and people of color certainly cannot, especially Black people. Okay, I'll step off my high horse and move on. Next, we are in Jerry's apartment. Kramer is sitting in Jerry's kitchen reading a paper when Jerry enters. And he tells Jerry he's waiting for his shirt in the oven since he did not have enough quarters for the dryer. And he says this is a much better option. Why can't you use your oven? Of course, Jerry wonders. I'm baking a pie, he says. George buzzes, and Kramer notices that Jerry bought some cigars. He tells him, yeah, I got some Cubans for George's wedding. It's more than I wanted to spend, but what the hell? Well, Kramer tests one out and is immediately disgusted, notices that it says Producto de Peru. Jerry is livid. He spent $300 for the cigars. He could have gotten a house in Peru for $300. So he's got to give Todd Gack $300 so he can keep seeing Elaine without asking her out. And Kramer, I love how Kramer immediately gets distracted. Ooh, that's a great name. Todd Gack. What is that, Dutch? The oven dings, and Kramer is so excited to get his warm shirt. He puts it on, and oh, mama. George enters as Kramer exits, and George is just panicking. Jerry's like, all right, well, what's Steinbrenner going to do if he doesn't get his calzone tomorrow? Well, that's the point, George says. No one knows. He fires people like it's a bodily function. Well, can't you get someone else from the office to get him paisanos? Well, before you know it, he'll be having lunch with them. You know how these inter-office politics work? No, I've never had a job, Jerry says. Kramer enters with his pants to go into Jerry's oven. George is like, what is going on? Kramer's cooking up some corduroy. George says there's got to be a way to get back into paisanos. And Kramer recognizes that name. He says, oh, Newman raves about that place. It's on his mail route. He goes there every day. Well, that gives George an idea, and he exits. What kind of pie you baking? Huckleberry. Huckleberry is really good, by the way. I'm embarrassed to say this, but I don't even know if I knew huckleberry was an actual berry until about 5 years ago. I know it's embarrassing, but here in Colorado and in Utah, they've got like huckleberry flavored things. Like there's a huckleberry flavored soda that I tried that was so good. Huckleberry ice cream at this really great place in Utah, in Moab, actually. And anyway, I'm a big fan of huckleberry. I would love to taste Kramer's pie. All right, next we're in Newman's apartment. Newman is really enjoying stringing George along about doing this favor for him. Tells him he doesn't like him. You're always hanging out with Jerry and wasting your lives away. Are you going to help me or not? Yeah, Newman says he will. But he makes a deal that he needs to have his own calzone, a slice of pepperoni, a large soda, and 3 times a week he shall require a cannoli. A bit steep, don't you think? And then when Newman knows the cards he has to play, he points out how Steinbrenner can be very erratic. All right, George agrees. He tells him he has to have the food by 1 p.m. He's very regimented about his meals. I know exactly how he feels. And George exits while Newman is maniacally laughing. All right, next we're in a restaurant. It's a pretty swanky place that Todd has taken Elaine to. Todd tells the host that it's Gack, party of 4. Elaine turns to him. 4? Who are we meeting? In walks Todd Gack's parents. He introduces them to Elaine, and she's, of course, shocked. Hello. Then we cut to the end of the dinner. Elaine tells Todd's parents it was nice meeting them. Todd hugs his mom goodbye, and she tells him she's wonderful, referring to Elaine. Elaine hears this, and she's just so confused. The parents exit, and she turns to Todd. She's like, what was that? What? Why did you introduce me to your parents? Oh, they're nice people. I thought you'd like them. Come on, Todd, she says. Admit it. This was a date. Why was this a date? It's Saturday night with your parents? Elaine says, unless I'm your sister, this was a date. Todd, again, is offended. Why can't you just meet someone's parents without classifying it as a date? Well, if it wasn't a date, what was it? It was a lovely evening together, he says. Elaine says, I don't believe this. He asks her if he can give her a ride home, and she's like, nah, I'm just going to walk. Then he literally puts his arm around her, tries to go in for a kiss. She backs away. Now what is that? All right, the actress in this scene who plays Todd's mother is Jane Johnston. She has also appeared in Jag, The Witches of Eastwick, and My Name is Earl. And I know she also returns to Seinfeld as the woman in the audience at the Tonys. And I think she does a great job here. She's a perfect mom for Todd Gack. And those eyebrows are notable. I don't want to insult Jane Johnston, but those eyebrows make her look permanently surprised. They're very 1940s. Just wow. My take on this scene, I do love how this plot keeps getting heightened. Now that's a concept that I learned in improv, heightening. So it's like you take a plot, you take a premise, or whatever the game of the scene is that you found, and you just keep heightening it. You keep making it the stakes higher. You keep making it more ridiculous. So here, it's just, okay, he meets her for dinner because of a bet. Okay, the cigars. And it's like this whole kind of doubt of, is he asking me out on dates or what is going on? And then, heightening it with her meeting his parents. So great. And okay, she does get frustrated, but here is where I think Elaine should just tell Todd Gack completely off. I mean, come on, dude, you're such a liar. I also hate, one of my biggest pet peeves is when people turn shit around and blame you or make you feel like an idiot for your feelings. Like, Elaine is in the right here for questioning his ridiculous actions, but he keeps making her feel stupid for asking. Like I said, she does show her frustration. She says, I can't believe this. But I would have just loved a little bit more of a moment where she tells him off, especially after the attempted kiss. I mean, this guy's a full-on creep. All right, next we're outside Newman's door. George is approaching with an envelope. He's about to slide it under the door when he hears Newman singing in the rain, in fact. He knocks and Newman answers. He says, I was just about to drop off the Calzone money for the week, and shouldn't you be at work by now? Work, he says, it's raining. I called in sick. I don't work in the rain. You don't work in the rain. You're a mailman. Neither rain nor sleet. It's the first one, George says. Well, Newman's never really been big on creeds. That's such a great line. Well, George reminds him of the deal, but Newman clarifies that the deal was to deliver the calzones while he was on his route, but that he wouldn't be going on his route. But I'm paying you, George says. Yes, thank you. He grabs the money and closes the door. And then we get a George Newman. All right, next we are in Jerry's apartment. Nikki is looking at the cigars from Todd Gack, says, I thought you wanted cigars from Cuba. He says, I did. She says, well, if this isn't what you wanted, why would you pay him? Well, what could I do? Jerry says. Then he looks at her. He's like, unless you paid him a visit. And Nikki agrees. In the hallway, we see George approaching Kramer's door as Nikki's exiting. Kramer answers the door, and George asks him if he could deliver the calzones. Well, what about Newman? He called in sick. Oh, right. It's raining. Kramer agrees. George asks if he needs money. He says, no. He needs to unload all that change. All right, next we're on the street and Paisanos. Kramer is in these cargo pants with the pockets filled with his change. He's struggling to walk. He tries running for the bus and the change just keeps falling out. Bends over to pick up the change. It comes pouring out of his pocket and he falls down. And then we see him arrive at Paisanos, all soaked from the rain. He orders the calzones. The guy puts them in the huge oven and Kramer can't help but notice, oh, that's a big oven. I wonder if you could do me a favor. Next, we're in Monk's. Elaine enters to see Todd and Nikki at a table. They all greet each other, and Nikki says, wait, Elaine will settle this. What does the M stand for in Richard M. Nixon? If you notice, she says M. Elaine says, Millhouse. I told you. He said it was Mo. They all start laughing, and Nikki tells Todd, you owe me a dinner. And Elaine's like, oh, and looks at Todd suspiciously, and he just shrugs. My take on this scene, I think it's a funny scene. I love the look Todd Gack gives Elaine at the end, this sort of guilty shrug. Only after he moves on to another woman does he sort of admit what he was doing. All right, next we're back at Paisanos. The guy gives Kramer his order of 3 calzones and 1 hot shirt and a jacket. Oh, these are all burned up. What the hell do I know about cooking a shirt, huh? Tells him the total for the calzones, and Kramer starts dishing out handfuls of change onto the countertop. The guy tells him he can't pay in change. He needs bills. Well, this is all I got. Then you don't have the calzones. And he takes the box of calzones away and starts yelling, and Kramer starts yelling back at him in sort of fake Italian and exits. But not before kicking the counter, which I think is such a funny move. All right, next we're in George's office. Kramer enters and George asks where the calzones are. Well, he wouldn't give them to me because I wanted to pay in change. What the hell happened to your shirt? He overcooked it. Kramer takes his burnt clothes and throws it at George's garbage bin, which is right next to the vent. Oh, your clothes smell just like Paisanos. George thinks of another Italian place. Maybe I can fool him, and exits. We cut to Steinbrenner's office, and he's yelling on the phone at someone and then apologizes and says he's just hungry. What the hell is Costanza with the calzones? And then through the vent, he smells Kramer's clothes and thinks Costanza is there with the Paisanos, but not in his office. He freaks out and runs out of his office to find George. All right, next we're in Jerry's apartment. Elaine and Jerry are on the couch smoking the terrible cigars. Jerry is also upset that Todd and Nikki got together because he sent her over to him. Elaine's like, these are terrible. Jerry's like, it's like trying to smoke a chicken bone. With the cigar in her mouth, we hear Elaine say, what kind of name is Todd Gack anyway? Jerry says, through a smile I think he's about to break, I think it's Dutch. It's actually German. I saw in the notes about nothing, if anyone was wondering. And Jerry says, I have to get going. Elaine asks, where? I gotta go walk Nikki's dog. But she dumped you. I know, Jerry says, but somehow she explained it and I couldn't say no. It smells like a rubber fire in here. What's that? I said a rubber fire. Elaine asks if he ever ended up paying Todd for the cigars, and he says, it's actually being taken care of right now. My take on this scene, it's definitely the best Elaine scene. Talking with a cigar in her mouth is such a funny visual gag. I love it. And Jerry's really funny here too. The two of them together in this scene are really, it's a good pairing. All right, next we are at Todd Gack's door. Kramer knocks and Todd answers. You Gack? Yeah. Here's your money. He flings a bag full of change into him and Todd Gack falls over. There's a tag to the episode where Steinbrenner is trashing George's office looking for the Paisanos. George enters and Steinbrenner finds Kramer's clothes, asks George why the clothes smell like calzones. And he tells him he put them in the oven to heat them up. Oh, that's not a bad idea, Steinbrenner says. Oh, maybe we should put all the uniforms in a big pizza oven before the game. Big Stein's onto something. I smell a pennant. All right, I'm going to take a quick break, and I will see you on the other side. Excuse me, do you have to close your store now? Professor, are you sure I only got a C+? Doctor, am I really out of network? Hi, I'm Nikki. I've always been able to get what I want in life. It's so easy, and I want to share with you my secret of getting what I want. Just ask. Ever since I was a little girl and started modeling before I could walk, the ability to get what I want was just a part of me. From then on, whether it be a pageant, a booked restaurant, or really any place with a manager, I could always ask my way to get what I wanted and deserved. So I decided to write a self-help book, Beautiful Godzilla, Nikki's Tips to Getting Your Way. I know what you're thinking. Oh, Nikki is beautiful. That's why she gets her way. Well, I asked all of my straight male friends if that was true, and they all said no. So there you go. Trust me, it never hurts to ask. In my experience, the answer is always what you want it to be 100% of the time. You can order Beautiful Godzilla, Nikki's Tips to Getting Your Way directly from Jeff Bezos. I asked him if he could personally sell my book, and he said yes. See, it works. Just call him any time of day or night at 555 Penis Rocket. He will personally get your information and answer any questions you may have for him. Beautiful Godzilla, Nikki's tips to getting your way. I've never lifted a suitcase. And we're back. Well, as for the extras, nothing really stood out to me to include, so we're just going to go ahead and move on to Greg's sack lunch. Every week, Greg, who is our most valued and dedicated contributor to this podcast, he sends in a sack full of his thoughts. And for this week, the Calzone, this is what Greg thinks. His overall thoughts, he says, "There's a lot about this episode that I think could have been great, but I didn't love the execution of most of it. Some of it is the presence of Steinbrenner, a character I don't find funny at all, but some is also the casting and the other characters we see in this one." Ooh, I'm intrigued. For those of you who don't know, you might be new to the podcast, I haven't mentioned this in a while. I do not read Greg's sack lunch before I record. So this is all fresh to me, just so I can have a genuine reaction to everything Greg says. So anyway, back to his overall thoughts. Yeah, Greg and I are on the same page here. I never find Steinbrenner funny. I honestly, I think I also find the whole disembodied voice back of the body of another actor, acting out what the voice is saying. Like, there's something just off-putting about it to me. I've never enjoyed it. I've never found this funny. And I just wonder, I'm like, do you have to be a Yankees fan at that time with Steinbrenner at the helm? Like, is this funny to those people? I don't know. It's not worth trying to figure out. We're talking 30 years later, pretty much. So anyway, moving on. Next in Greg's sack are his favorite scenes and Elaine moments. He says, "My favorite Elaine moment is when she's explaining her non-date with Todd Gack, and Jerry says he never walks her to her door, and Elaine responds, 'That's because you're a jackass.' While her storyline is an interesting one, it doesn't have a ton of humor to it. I also think the actor playing Todd Gack is just so boring, he adds nothing to this guy. So Elaine's best moments are pretty uneventful, and she gets more working with Jerry than with Gack." Okay, well, we disagree a little bit there. I think John D'Aquino plays Todd Gack really well. And again, not to repeat myself, but it's just because he's not doing anything overly funny. It's just very honest replies. So I don't find him boring. I think he's funny. But to your point, I think it's a good storyline, but the execution was not there. Next, he says, Elaine's best scene is when she's smoking the cigars with Jerry. I love how she talks without removing the cigar from her mouth. It's the funniest thing for her in this episode. Totally agree, and I'll get more into that when I get to my favorite moments. Next in Greg's sack is his scene swap idea. He says, "This is not a great episode. It has some good ideas, but a lot of it just isn't funny. Elaine's storyline is fine, but it needs more comedy to it. Jerry's story is also interesting, but not all that funny. The woman playing Nikki is as boring as Todd Gack, and I don't get how she was chosen for the part or why it was written so flat. I'd have ditched any scene where Larry David rambles on as the unfunny Steinbrenner and played up more with George and Newman or the Paisanos guy. There should have been another element to Elaine's story beyond Gack as well. Maybe she follows Nikki around or befriends her to see how it is she gets men to do what she wants. I would have liked her to be more involved in that Jerry plot beyond just the beginning at the theater. That would have been more interesting than anything else we're given here." Oh, those are great ideas. Thank you so much, Greg. Yeah, and I agree with you too, where it's a good plot for Elaine, but it's just not funny. It's not funny enough. Well, I disagree a little bit. I do think Todd Gack is funny, but yeah, they needed to really punch up that whole storyline. And we're on the same page with Nikki. And like I said, she was cast because she was so beautiful. I mean, clearly beauty over any acting ability. So there is also another story. So Alec Berg met Dylan Tays, who plays Nikki, of course, on this shoot. And that same year, he had gotten invited to the Oscars because he had written some jokes for the Oscars. I think a lot of you are finding something familiar here. So he invites her and she accepts. And then he shows up at her apartment and there's a dude there. So fast forward to when Jerry asks a waitress out to the Tonys. Oh, he's written some jokes for the Tonys, so he got tickets. Yeah, it's the same thing. So Alec Berg got a story idea from dating this woman, Dylan Tays, who plays Nikki, where he shows up and he's like, he tells the writers later, there was this dude at her place. Apparently it was some like photographer. He wanted to take photos of her before the Oscars. And I guess Alec Berg, I don't know at what point this happened, but he said, yeah, I went in to kiss her. And the dude kind of had a weird reaction. But anyway, it was very clear she just wanted to go to the Oscars. And then Jerry in the commentary points out, well, you wanted to take a beautiful woman to the Oscars, so I think both got your way. But anyway, so Dylan Tays, as flat and boring as her performance is in this episode, she did inspire a really good episode with Jerry taking the waitress to the Tonys, and she has a dude. All right, moving on. The next thing in Greg's sack are his extra thoughts. He says, we get a very, very rare George and Newman pairing, which is interesting because neither Kramer or Jerry are even involved. I wish they had done this more, actually, because it's such a unique dynamic. Yes, they did point that out, saying, oh, this is the first time George and Newman have a plot together. And I agree. Those two together, Wayne Knight and Jason Alexander, that's a great duo right there and really funny together. So I do wish they did more of that. Next, Greg says, who is going to eat the same exact meal every day for lunch, let alone a calzone, other than Adam Scott on Parks and Rec? Yes. I can't think of a calzone without thinking of Ben Wyatt from Parks and Rec. I know, gross. Like, and then, well, in that scene where Steinbrenner talks about, oh no, I stick with the same thing every day, and that for a number of years he had a turkey chili in a bread bowl every day for lunch, like for years. I'm like, oh my God, my heartburn. Like, I feel like I have phantom heartburn just imagining that. Ugh. And finally, Greg says, tipping so that the server sees you is something I am guilty of as well. So I totally get George here wanting the credit. You want them to see you do it. Oh, absolutely. This is such a great classic Seinfeldian plot. I mean, the tip jar thing in general, I mean, it's such a social kind of dilemma in many ways where do you tip? What's appropriate for tipping? It definitely got more life during the pandemic where everything was contactless payment and all of those devices. It was prompting you to tip. And it was like, oh my God, I have to tip for everything now. And it's such a complicated issue. I mean, I just always do it. I'll do it. I don't stand on my principles about, no, we shouldn't have to tip for everything. Like, whatever. If I can spare a couple dollars, I'm going to do it. Whatever. I'm not going to make a federal case out of it. I've just made the decision for myself. I'm tipping. It's fine. Yeah, the jars aren't as prevalent as before. It's more of those, those little devices that you have to control. But I do think they see it every time because they're kind of, interacting with it. And I always get a thank you. So that's always nice. All right. Thank you so much, Greg. We always enjoy your thoughts every week. And even though it was an episode I know you don't really love, Steinbrenner heavy episodes, you all should know it's a little torturous for him to do a write-up for those types of episodes. So we really appreciate it. Thank you, Greg. And now it's time to close Greg's sack lunch. All right, moving on to my favorite Elaine moments. Well, no surprise, it's the cigar talking. I love that she's talking with a big cigar in her mouth. What kind of name is Todd Gack anyway? And I also love that it smells like a rubber fire in here. I said a rubber fire. And I have no close second because, unfortunately, there was nothing to choose from. And my final notes for the episode. I already touched on this, but I really do enjoy the concept of the dating loophole, but I think it just could have been made more interesting, more funny. I would have loved for Elaine to sniff it out herself or totally flipping it. Maybe Elaine was the one creating situations and finding the dating loopholes. Just something different, more interesting. It was just too repetitive after a while. My scene swap idea, literally all the Steinbrenner crap. I just never find it funny. I think I've said this a few times. The one part of that plot that's relatable and funny is the whole tip jar bit. I've just said that. Sorry, I'm repeating myself. So I think it would have been better served to expound on that whole thing, the whole tip jar stuff, instead of the Steinbrenner stuff. Like, I don't give a shit that he's addicted to calzones. Like, this is stupid. And I thought of this too while I was writing my notes, like, what if Todd Gack, like, more loopholes? Maybe he tries to befriend all the guys in order to see Elaine more. Like, that's how he's weaseling his way in. Okay, he does that with the cigars with Jerry. Maybe he finds out something about George that he could, maybe he agrees to bring the calzones. I don't know. Something where Todd is just really getting in on every aspect of Elaine's world and then denying, like, no, I just thought Kramer and I would have fun, whatever, swimming in the Hudson. Like, I don't know. Anyway, I just feel like that could have also been a funny way to eliminate the Steinbrenner stuff, have the Todd Gack stuff be, a little bit more comedic. JLD does the best she can with very little comedy. It's very reactive for her in this episode. She's just reacting constantly to what Todd Gack is giving her. I'm getting kind of tired of that. I have to be honest. So I've been rewatching Veep. I'm pretty much always rewatching Veep. It's kind of my go-to before bed, just expletive-laden lullaby before I drift off to sleep. And it's like, first of all, if you haven't watched Veep, shame on you. If you're a JLD fan, absolutely shame on you. But when you see what this woman can do, what a comedic genius she is. And now watching all these Seinfeld episodes for this podcast, I'm just like, it is criminal that they allow any episode to not display Julia Louis-Dreyfus's just expertise in all things comedy. It's really criminal. And I know it's an ensemble. It's they have to kind of have a plot for everyone, and everyone's really talented in the cast. So I know I'm just being selfish, but now just watching Veep so much, I'm just reminded every night there's a moment in every episode, at least one moment in every Veep episode, where I'm just sitting there going, how the hell did she come up with that? Like, that is insanely genius. Like, so funny. She can make comedy out of anything. Anyway, I know you guys know this about me. I am JLD forever. So, but I just wanted to mention that too, because watching Veep so often, I'm just, I can't help it, especially watching these types of episodes of Seinfeld where I'm like, really? All you're going to give Julia Louis-Dreyfus is confused looks at Todd Gack for an entire episode? Come on, guys. And I think that's all I can say about the calzone. I really let loose there. Thank you so much for listening. If you would please rate and review this podcast, it really does help. I would so appreciate it. Also, be sure to follow the pod on social media. On Instagram, it's at HotHeavyElaine, TikTok at Elaine Bennis Podcast. And if you'd like to email me your thoughts, please do at elainepodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for listening, and I will see you next time.